Welcome back to the Hockey Hotbed, presented as always by the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as DraftKings. Make sure you use promo code THPN when you visit the DraftKings Sportsbook app for great odds and opportunities. Once again, that is promo code THPN at the DraftKings Sportsbook app. I want to finish off this show by talking about definitely the hottest team right now in the NHL. Probably when I do my next power rankings, they're going to be first or second because this team is firing on all cylinders on every corner of the ice in every aspect of the game. They're one of the top in the league right now in basically everything. And that is the Calgary Flames. Right now, they sit atop the Pacific Division. Yes, above the Edmonton Oilers, who have had a really good start to the season as well. And they sit atop the entire Western Conference right now. Something that Something that they were able to do a couple years back, but not capitalize in the playoffs. And then the last couple of years, you said, okay, the Flames, that was their peak. They're starting to steadily decline, but it seems like they've been able to recapture some of that energy here to start off the 2021-22 regular season. And right now, they're 2 points behind teams like the Carolina Hurricanes and the Florida Panthers for being the best team in the NHL when it comes to points so far this season. But they are for sure the best team in the Western Conference right now and so far this entire season, mainly on the backs of, this whole team has performed extremely well. But if you're looking for standouts, Andrew Mangiapane and Jacob Markstrom have been otherworldly for this team so far. Mangiapane, obviously 3 more goals over this past weekend, bringing his total to 15 on the season. His career high, which he set last season, was 18 goals. He is 3 off of that, and we're not even to American Thanksgiving. It is November 23rd. He has 15 goals already on the season. So, needless to say, he's going to be breaking his previous record. And that 15 goals, by the way, is tied for second in the NHL with Alex Ovechkin, only 3 behind Leon Draisaitl for the NHL leading goals. So a really good start for Andrew Mangiapane. Did anybody see that coming? We knew he was going to have a good year. He had a good season last year, 18 goals. I don't think anybody expected him to go out and pot 15 this quickly. Now, in total points, he's not, only has 17 total points because he only has 2 assists with those 15 goals. But he's the goal scorer. He's the trigger man in Calgary, one of the many that they're able to have. Jacob Markstrom, on the other hand, has just been otherworldly in net. The Flames signed him to a 6-year deal prior to last season, and, last year wasn't a great year for him. They burned 1 year of that, and it wasn't good. They didn't even make the postseason. They were playing meaningless games against the Vancouver Canucks during the postseason, but still technically playing regular season games. It wasn't a great year for Calgary last year. But this year, Jacob Markstrom has come out with a vengeance. This is the Markstrom that we saw for the Vancouver Canucks back in the bubble. This is the Jacob Markstrom that we saw prior to the bubble that was playing extremely well, the one that earned that 6-year contract. He has 5 shutouts on the season already. There are some goaltenders that don't even have 5 wins this year. There are some NHL teams. We just talked about in the first segment. The Arizona Coyotes have 4 wins this year. Jacob Markstrom has 5 shutouts. As if that wasn't ridiculous enough, he is second in the NHL in both goals allowed average and save percentage. He has a 1.71 goals allowed average and a 942 save percentage. It also helps that Dan Vladar has been pretty good behind him. Has 2 shutouts in his own right. So the Flames altogether have 7 shutouts thus far onto the season. That's sort of ridiculous when you think about it. But Jacob Markstrom for sure has been exactly what the Flames have needed him to be, exactly what the Flames paid him to be. And right now that their general manager, Brad Treliving, he's smiling like a butcher's dog. He's happy watching his goaltender, watching that deal pay off right in front of his eyes in year 2. Now, are Mangiapane and Markstrom the only players that are performing? No, because you can't be this good with only 2 players playing as well as they are, even if one of them is the goaltender. Elias Lindholm, Johnny Gaudreau, and Matthew Tkachuk are all having really good seasons to start. Elias Lindholm, listen, I don't take plus minus into account very often. Unless you are ridiculously either high on the plus side or low on the minus side. But Elias Lindholm is leading the NHL right now in plus minus with a plus 18. Johnny Gaudreau is fourth right now with plus 14. So that's when I start to take it, at least with a grain of salt, taking it into account with the rest of the team's performance. Matthew Tkachuk, once again, I mean, he's having a good season, proving that he's worth the money, proving that he is, one of the stars of this team. Even though he is probably the most marketable name in Calgary, he's not the top player. That's the thing about Calgary. They have him, who is a marketable name, mainly just because of his last name, because of his antics. But they're a solid team. Added Blake Coleman in the offseason. He's been okay. But the depth that this team has and the ability that this team has at 5-on-5 on both special teams is what is setting them apart right now. If you look at their team stats, they're in the top 10 in a lot of things that matter, okay? We talked about special teams. Their penalty kill is running at 87.5% right now, which is 6th in the NHL. Playing in a division with Connor McDavid and the number one power play for the Edmonton Oilers, that's going to be very important when these two teams start matching up. The Flames penalty kill has been pretty good, and their power play is no slouch either. Now, they're not 45 or whatever percent the Edmonton Oilers are, but the Calgary Flames right now are running at a 24.6% clip on the power play. That's also good for 6th in the NHL. So if you're in the top 10 in both categories when it comes to special teams, you're usually going to be finishing in the top tier of the standings. But right now, because of that, add on the fact that they have right now probably the best goaltender across the entire NHL. They have one of the most premier goal scorers in the NHL. That's why this team is leading the Western Conference. That's why this team is close to being the top team in the entire NHL. Then you look at some of the other stats. Goals per game. 3.32 goals per game right now. That's good for 9th in the NHL. That's pretty good. When you're only giving up, and especially, Markstrom's only giving up 1.7 goals per game and you're scoring 3.3, that's usually a pretty good factor to have there. Total goals, 63 this year for the Calgary Flames. That's tied for 3rd in the NHL. When you look at the Calgary Flames, and realistically, when you look at the Pacific Division as a whole, you think, okay, the key to winning this division, good defense, a lot of physicality, and just enough scoring. I talked about it when I talked about the Seattle Kraken. That's what they built their team around. They were supposed to have good defense, good goaltending, and just enough scoring. While unfortunately for them, the goaltending has not been good. Philip Grubauer's struggling. Chris Driedger also struggling to start the season. It hasn't been good in between the pipes for Seattle. But the Calgary Flames, while they do fit that mold, they're a physical team. I mean, they still employ Milan Lucic, for Christ's sake. So they're a physical team. Jacob Markstrom, the goaltender, has been outstanding. They're the number one team in the NHL in goals allowed per game at 1.89. So they check all those boxes. They're physical. They don't give up many goals because of good goaltending and good defense. That's great and all, but they're also very, very dangerous right now with the puck. They're putting the puck in the back of the net a lot. And not just Andrew Mangiapane, who is on a basically, a godly start. He's a demigod right now for the Calgary Flames. Johnny Gaudreau, who started off slow, is up to, I believe, 8 goals already. Elias Lindholm is scoring basically at will. Matthew Tkachuk has had a pretty good start. This team is finding the back of the net at a much higher clip than we ever expected the Calgary Flames to score. And it's paying dividends for them as well. Is this sustainable for the Calgary Flames? I'll talk on Friday's episode about another team that has got off to a better start than expected. And I'll ask that same question. Is this sustainable? The way the Flames are playing, now I don't expect Markstrom to continue getting shutouts in 30% of his starts. I don't expect him to keep that goals allowed average under 2 all season. And that save percentage is probably going to dip below 935 at some point. You would have to imagine. He's going to have a stretch here. And you have to also imagine at some point Andrew Mangiapane is going to cool off. But the way this team is structured, the way this team is built, and the way that everybody is playing right now for the Calgary Flames, this is definitely sustainable for them. In my opinion, they're in the weaker of the two conferences. They're in the weaker of the two divisions in that conference. And they're a team that is built to sustain the type of play that they're playing. Yeah, I think the Calgary Flames are the real deal this year. I do. I think this is a team that is going to be the playoffs. And I think this is a team that, for the first time in several years, is going to be able to make some noise in the postseason. The one thing they were really missing for the longest time was a goaltender. They went out and paid Markstrom. It didn't work last season, but the entire team didn't work last season. This year, everything's clicking on all cylinders. You have a guy in Mangiapane that was basically homegrown for them, and is paying dividends. You have the marketable stars in Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk, even Elias Lindholm, and you have a really, really good defense core. No massive names on that defense core. Mark Giordano was basically the big, massive name for the Calgary Flames, and he's gone now. So no absolutely massive names on the blue line for the Calgary Flames, but they're getting the job done. They're showing up, getting the job done, and I do think it's sustainable. I think it's going to be between them, Edmonton, and Vegas in the Pacific Division. I like what the Ducks have done. They've had a good start to the season. I would put my money more on the Flames than on the Ducks to continue what they're doing. The Kings aren't as bad this year. Okay. The Kraken, eventually they're gonna get to the mean. They're gonna play a little bit better. They're gonna get better goaltending. But for the Calgary Flames, they're sitting pretty right now towards the end of November. And I think that's definitely sustainable for them. Like I mentioned, there's going to be some low points. They're going to go through a couple bad stretches. But Jacob Markstrom, even if he regresses a little bit towards the mean from what he's doing, that's still going to be good enough to be top 3 in Vezina voting, potentially a Vezina Trophy winning goaltender this year. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Hockey Hotbed. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether that be on the podcast version or on the YouTube version here, as this last segment was on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in so much. If you like this video on YouTube, like it, subscribe to the Hockey Hotbed on YouTube. If you liked the entire podcast, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Download our new episodes so I know you're there. And if you would, please just give me a rating. I'd love it for 5 stars, and definitely leave a note as to what you think about the Calgary Flames in the comments section. Leave a review. Do you think that the Calgary Flames' current pace is sustainable? I do. So leave a comment on YouTube or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Let me know. Do you think the Calgary Flames' current pace is sustainable? And I'll talk about that a little bit next week when we circle back to that. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice. Or sorry, got my podcast mixed up. That's going to do it for this episode of the Hockey Hotbed. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys on Friday.